I started playing the violin when I was about 4.5 years old, and I don't exactly remember the details of it, but what my parents told me is that I had a favorite book back then, which was called The Philharmonic Gets Dressed, and actually you can still find this book. And it's a picture book that shows all these different people, some of them big, some of them small, some old, some young, all at their homes and getting ready, getting dressed for some big event. And shows them putting on their pants and their belts and their dresses and their shoes, and then finally all going to the same place. And it turns out that's a concert hall, and they're all members of the Philharmonic, of an orchestra. And at the end, you see a picture of them all in their tuxedos with the conductor there, and they're about to start the concert. So I really liked this book when I was a little kid. And because of this, my parents thought maybe I'd be interested in playing an instrument. And the place I was living at the time had a very good program for Suzuki violin, which is a method that some of you may know. And that's what I started with when I was 4.5 years old. I started on a tiny violin. It was I think it was a 16th size. And every few months or years, I would trade in for a little bit bigger violin. And by the time I guess I was 11, then I had a full-size violin. I don't always like practicing my scales and arpeggios, but playing the violin is in some ways really like playing a sport. And if you don't exercise and if you don't train the muscles that you have to use for it, you get worse over time. So that's why if you ever go to a baseball game, you see everybody warming up beforehand and they're practicing particular skills they have to do. They're practicing throwing the ball to a particular place, or they're practicing running because they have to run near the game. They're not runners themselves, but that's a part of their profession. For me, at this point in my development, a good practice session is 4 or 5 hours a day. Now, I don't do that all without a break. I usually practice 45 minutes or an hour and then take a short break, because mentally and physically, you can't keep your concentration for much longer than that. And the important thing about practicing is not actually so much how long you do it, but how well you do it. So when you're practicing, you want to really be focusing on getting better and focusing on the things that are not quite as good as you would like them. And that takes real concentration and effort. And if you're just going through the motions and playing without thinking about it, you're not really helping yourself. You may be spending time practicing, but in the end, it doesn't contribute to you playing better. Memorizing music has always been pretty easy for me, just because by the time I have something ready to perform, by the time I've practiced it so much that I know all the notes, where to put my fingers, who else is playing, by that time I usually know in my head how it goes. And with a piece like the Beethoven Concerto, it's a piece I've listened to all my life. So I think even though I'm not working to memorize it, I've been memorizing it since I was young, because I've heard the piece over and over again, and so it stays in my head. So if you're working on a piece and you want to be able to memorize it, one thing to do is just listen to that piece a lot. And you can sing it to yourself when you're not with the violin and see how far you get just singing it to yourself. Because if you can sing through the whole thing, then you basically know it by memory.